West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
And we begin tonight with a stark historical parallel. The United Nations as we know it now began to come together in the summer of 1945, with World War II nearly over and Europe in ruins in the wake of Adolf Hitler's 6-year blitzkrieg across the continent that killed tens of millions of people, including the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children trapped in concentration camps and shot, gassed, and starved to death in a campaign so barbaric, it came to be known simply as the Holocaust. But the origins of the United Nations began in the weeks after the attack on the U.S. military base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, by the Empire of Japan. It was after that Winston Churchill visited the White House. On the morning of January 1st, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt went to the room Churchill was staying with at the White House to say he wanted to change the name of the Allied coalition from the Associated Powers to the United Nations. As the World War II Museum notes, Churchill approved of the change and the name United Nations stuck. Later that very same day, representatives of 26 countries signed the Declaration of the United Nations, and 21 more countries formally joined the alliance prior to the end of the Second World War. The UN officially began in October 1945, and every American president since then has addressed its General Assembly. Today, President Biden, who's been in politics longer than almost anyone alive, addressed the gathering for the fourth and final time as America's head of state.
I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power.
For all his sincerity, everyone listening in that room knew that President Biden is a lame duck. He will no longer be president as of noon on January 20, 2025. So I'd imagine many of those assembled ambassadors had to be wondering, who will we be dealing with next year, and what world will we be navigating? Will it be a Kamala Harris world, a world where she's vowing to defend our global alliances and to be the president of all Americans? Her campaign is out with a new ad today, reaching out to Republican farmers in Pennsylvania. Or will it be the world of Donald Trump, who it's not clear knows the difference between the American state of Georgia and the country Georgia, given his recent comments at one of his increasingly insane rallies, and whose latest pronouncements have grown even more bizarre and unhinged, building a dystopian vision of America that is an unmitigated hellscape where you can't walk out of your home without being raped and murdered by black and brown immigrants who are marauding through the country like zombies in The Walking Dead, just rampaging through white suburbia, raping and killing. Donald Trump, particularly when surrounded by his MAGA flash mob, and even in friendly right-wing media interviews, is officially sounding more and more like the man the United Nations was created to respond to, Adolf Hitler. With his recent comments that the Jews will bear a lot of blame if he loses the election, and now his comments about how he'd conduct his mass deportations of immigrants.
We're getting the criminals out, and we're going to do that fast, and we know who they are. The local police know their names, and they know their serial numbers. They know everything about them. We're not a dumping ground. We're going to get all of those people out, and we're going to get them out fast.
Now, it's one disgusting thing to say in an interview that you plan to give immigrants serial numbers, like in the old Nazi concentration camps. But what makes it even more Hitlerian is not just that he's willing to say it, but how his cult reacts to his demagoguing and racist lies.
Do you think Springfield will ever be the same? I don't think. The fact is, and I'll say it now, you have to get them the hell out. You have to get them out. I'm sorry. To get them out. Can't have it. Can't have it. They've destroyed it.
Your periodic reminder that Trump and J.D. Vance's claims about Springfield originated from literal neo-Nazis. It's also worth noting that Vance once called Trump America's Hitler. And as Catherine Rampell notes in the Washington Post, it is Donald Trump who seems intent on making the Hitler comparison happen. Quote, in recent weeks, the Republican presidential nominee and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, have ramped up their baseless claims about violent invasions from impure foreigners, echoing blood and soil style rhetoric deployed nearly a century ago. Donald Trump is doing it in the face of a reality in Springfield, Ohio, where he and Vance have caused harm, not just to the Haitian immigrants, but to the whole city, at the behest of neo-Nazis who are happily taking credit for the real power Donald Trump has given them. But here's the reality about Trump's dystopian America. It doesn't exist. The FBI showed that violent crime was down 3% nationally last year. Murder was down nearly 12%, and rape decreased by 9%. Meanwhile, in actual middle America, this is what's actually happening in Springfield.
Just wanted to come down and support the Haitian restaurant and the Haitian people.
We drove over here, again, to show our solidarity with the Haitian community here.
People aren't rampaging through the Haitian community searching for their stolen pets. They're living their normal lives and patronizing Haitian restaurants to show love and solidarity, while Donald Trump and his beyond weird running mate try to set this country on fire just so that Trump can avoid going to prison. Joining me now is former Senator Al Franken of Minnesota, host of the Al Franken podcast, Paola Ramos, MSNBC contributor and author of Defectors, The Rise of the Latino Far Right and What It Means for America, and Dana Milbank, Washington Post columnist and author of Fools on the Hill, The Hooligans, Saboteurs, Conspiracy Theorists, and Dunces Who Burned Down the House. Both books were published today. I want to congratulate all of our authors here today. I've got my handy-dandy copy of Fools on the Hill right here, and I highly recommend it. I blurbed it, so you know it's good. Let me come to you just at the table here first. This is a man, Donald Trump, who hosted at his home, his personal home, a Nazi sympathizer who was among those who stormed the Capitol. Those are the people he has said he wants to pardon. He has called good people. This man's name was Timothy Hale Casanelli. He attended. Donald Trump appeared on video at this event. That is the kind of people Trump is now openly surrounding himself by. And now he's doing Hitler talk openly on the campaign trail.
No, you're right. And my colleague, Catherine Rampell, what she said is right. He's not shying from these comparisons. He's inviting these comparisons. And that was absolutely chilling, the litany that you just went through here. And I think it's important to understand, and why it should be particularly alarming to the world, is Donald Trump's not happening in a vacuum. You know, the autocrats are on the march. He just happens to be our aspiring autocrat here. But, you know, whether it's Putin in Russia or Orban in Hungary Modi in India or Netanyahu in Israel. There's a real struggle emerging here, and it's also somewhat related to what I've been writing about with the Fools on the Hill, because it's not just Trump. It's the entire congressional party, the internationalist wing of the Republican Party, the kind that was interested in the United Nations experiment. In the Senate, it's on life support. In the House, it is absolutely dead. You're seeing it constantly in the disparaging of foreign aid, of NATO, the inexcusable 5-month delay of getting military aid to Ukraine, which benefited Vladimir Putin, of course. You're seeing this over and over again, and I think that's the truly alarming thing, is that if there is a President Trump, there's no internationalist part of the party to push back against it anymore.
Yeah, and Senator Franken, I think that is the challenge, right? It's the metastasis of this, is that it isn't just Trump, who is an oddball, who thinks Georgia, he's not sure Georgia the state and Georgia the country aren't the same thing. He's clearly a diminished person cognitively. But he's got a whole group of senators and members of Congress around him that echo it as well. As the folks gather at the UN, they have to understand that there's a 50-50 chance that they'll be dealing with that cadre starting in January.
Yeah, well, and it gives nightmares to Europe. If Trump comes in, by all rights, he'll exit NATO. He'll abandon Ukraine. I mean, he's Putin's dream. And that's why we're getting Russian propaganda targeted very finely with AI this race, and it's very, very scary.
And Paula, to me, what's even scarier, and another excellent book. I'm trying to read all these books at one time. I'm a slow reader, but I started getting into them. I read a little bit and then I read others. Is a brilliant, brilliant tome. But it gets into something that actually really scares me a lot, which is this kind of open racism, this sort of almost KKK style rallying where people cheer, get them out, and wave signs that say deport them all now. This is being picked up in some cases inside of the Latino community. I want to just go here and let me play you what Donald Trump has said about Venezuelans, because they are one of his target groups. Let's listen to that.
Aurora, Colorado, you saw that, where Venezuelan gangs are taking over real estate. They become real estate developers. How nice. No, they're taking over real estate, and they have weapons that even our military hasn't seen. Who's giving them these weapons? But Aurora is a mess. The governor is a mess. The governor is a Democrat, and he's a radical left Democrat, and he's not too popular right now because they're going to take over a lot more than Aurora. They're going to go through Colorado, take over the whole damn state by the time they finish. Unless I become president, they won't last long.
And Paula, despite the fact that he talks that way, he started with Mexicans, now he's on to Venezuelans. Here's what you write. In the quest to fit into this country could be increasingly driving some Latinos toward extreme nativism, for there is nothing more nationalistic than making immigrants a sworn enemy of many white Americans, your enemy as well, especially if the enemy forces others to question your belongings.
It is Wednesday, the 25th of September of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and we will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Well, I guess they're everywhere. Are they not? Well, how are you today? We are doing fine here. Gonna have a busy day. Got to take the car in for some, regular maintenance on its maintenance program. And a few other tidbits of things to do out and about. So it will be somewhat of a busy day. Not so hot today. That'll be nice. It got quite warm yesterday. Nights are cool enough. We like it. But we'll get more into that, of course, when we do the weather from around the world. Oh, other areas of concern are, well, let me just give a little bit of local news. And what we usually speak about on local news is what occurs on the town Facebook page, because we're small. We're a small town. We're I guess people are bored. This is the closest to a party line telephone that you can get. And those of us old enough to remember party line phones know the dynamic of that. Yeah, talk about gossip. Okay, anyway, there has been somewhat of an edict passed down once again, reminding folks not to get involved in politics, meaning stop posting the MAGA stuff because it's going to bring out Justice and his cohorts. And nobody wants that, apparently. So the usual suspect, according to him, mistakenly posted a political post on the town Facebook page. And before I even had a chance to, and what my promise, or was it a threat? My promise is that every time Marvin and his group post a political post, it will be met by 3 successive music YouTube video posts in succession to push that political bullshit down the page. Of course, every time someone comments, that post will go to the top, which means another 3 music video posts to push the bullshit down the page. So I had not even begun that process when people kind of piled on the guy. And he actually backed off and took that post down. Oh, it was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to be here. But if all people want to do is post things about cute little kitties and cuddly puppies, well, meh. So I just said, come on, man. You never post joy. Post some joy. Well, he did actually post. It was snide, of course. Because in his snide little MAGA way, he wanted to know, are there any colors and breeds of cats and dogs that I'm restricted in posting here? Because we are the real racists, right? Well, he posted a post of a little black and white French bulldog, little ones. Yeah, little puggy things. French pug? Is that what it is, or a French bulldog? Nonetheless, it's a tiny little thing, and it was one of those TikTok videos where it's dancing, and they got some sort of, lyrics that the dog's singing or whatever. So it was a little snide retort by the usual suspect, but he's making an effort, okay? Because there's actually a way to sneak in your little political slant by your little innocuous posts. Mm-hmm. But it was heartening because people are not standing back while this bullshit gets perpetrated and pushed on us constantly. And the guy is totally guilty of using sites and influencers who are they're on the list of being paid by Russia. Now, I know that we have a Russian Orthodox Church on the other side of the mill, but that doesn't mean that we get to do what the Metropolitan over there tells us to, right? Because this is America. In spite of this fever dream that MAGA has, they got that Pauline lunatic. Anyway, she's at turning point. I can't discern how old this video is, but things keep surfacing. Anyway, she's going off about how she saw a vision of George Washington, who had a vision of an angel visiting him, warning him about communism. I just can't. I don't know. Even when I was a little kid in first grade, because you're usually a little kid in first grade, right? Anyway, when I was in first grade Catholic school, even then I wondered how, in the immensity of the universe, why would God care about politics? It doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense to me. If God was all-powerful, why would some little petty human dynamic matter? Well, apparently to MAGA it does, because they are the most ignorant not only about their government, but also about their supposed Christian religion. I've never seen a more stilted, stunted, misinformed, and outright opposite of what the teachings of Christ were. On the other hand, they might be doing the practical sort of thing that when certain, shall we say, personages appeared in the Catholic hierarchy over the millennia, determined that, like any high priest in any society, if we can make the rubes believe that we are the medium in which to speak to the great beyond, we might be able to tax them and get a bunch of money. It's kind of like what they did. So if you're the only one who knows and can predict, something as simple as an eclipse, you can weigh a lot of power over people. And they did. And so I think that there's a lot of materialists who appeared in the Catholic leadership over the years, obviously, that determined that the material gain on this planet is much more important than, I guess, one's eternal soul. Because you have that in every society and every religion. And what is an eternal soul anyway? Something we made up here because it, makes us feel like we can get through this chaos of the universe. Because we have to. We got lucky. All right? And I'll be damned if I let some ignorant assholes who don't know anything about their government, and they make it up as they go along. And as they're making it up, it has nothing to do with representative democracy, but it sure does seem like a lot of feudal warlord at best, or downright organized Nazism at worst. So, and this religiosity they supposedly have. Yeah, well, I guess if you're been raised in the prosperity gospel, I guess when Christ went in to turn the tables of the money changers, it was to steal the money, I guess. I have no idea where they come up with this BS. Well, I have my suspicions. I like being rhetorical. Okay, well, what else? Out in the world, looks like Jack Smith is going to be able to file a 180-page brief. And I don't know, man. We sure do have a really corrupt government judiciary. It's just so corrupt. And I got to tell you, it wasn't the Democrats that made it corrupt. It was those who pushed through Citizens United so all this dark money could be flowed into Republican coffers. And let's remember what Citizens United was all about. A lying documentary about Hillary Clinton. That wasn't supposed to be, done within a certain amount of time before the election, but they did it anyway. And then, remember the whole thing with Comey? Oh, yeah, we found some emails. And then when everybody was going to go vote, it was like, you know what? It was nothing. Don't worry about it. After the damage had already been done once again. Over and over and over. So now it is revealed that the lie, the headlines pushed by the New York Post and other newspapers around the country that Kamala Harris was involved in a hit-and-run accident came right out of Moscow in an office in the GRU. And they knew it. So here you have immediate dissemination of this propaganda, this lie by Russian spies. And yet, Politico, the New York Times, Washington Post, etc., all have hacked documents from the same Russian spies about Trump, and we're not hearing one thing. And why is that? Well, some people say it's the C word, corruption. I guess that's one word for it. But I have to say that joy can still overcome all that darkness. And joy has to manifest itself in just the most outrageous amount of people coming to vote. They're going to say we're all fake. Bust microscopic Chinese over the border. The southern border. It's got to be the southern border. All right. Because I got to tell you, when they're talking about rounding up all the immigrants and tattooing serial numbers on them, they're not talking about, people from Norway. Let's be clear about that. And I'm not saying that people from Norway are bad. I don't know. They could be sending us their worst. They're rapists. They're criminals. They're, poisoning the blood of whatever it is that we have. Maybe we need to have that kind of poisoning, because I got to tell you, it seems to me like they're doing a lot better in terms of their climate goals than we are. Because, when you got a bunch of ignorant imbeciles thinking that they know better than everybody else, like the know-nothings, right down to the rampant racism. Well, how else would you get Dred Scott? So all the MAGA justices and just the simply deplorable conservative ones on the Supreme Court said, kill Marcellus. And the 3 liberal justices said, the prosecutor, everybody says this guy is not just not guilty, but absolutely innocent. Wasn't there, the whole thing. And the governor just loves to kill people if they're black. Because on the same day, he pardoned the McCloskeys, that couple that came out of there were a couple of wacko lawyers came out of their mansion because people were marching down their street, and then they ostensibly demanded that people leave because it was a private thoroughway, that they had no right to be there, but they did. People can pass through on this. And they came out with automatic weapons and pointed it at people. And they got arrested for gun charges because, that's stupid. And Parsons pardoned them on the same day that he said, Marcellus, he dies. After the family of the victim, the DA, the prosecutor, the judge, and everybody had worked out a plea agreement in which Marcellus would not die. But when you got Supreme Court justices who lied about being balls and strikes umpire judges, we only call balls and strikes. Well, as soon as John Roberts said that, I told everybody he's going to call a lot of foul balls home runs. Mark my words, and look where we are. Total immunity. Alrighty. Okay, well, enough of that. I got it in, didn't I? Yes, I did. Let us, why don't we just get into what we have curated for you, because we take a little bit of time to do that, and, it's kind of fun, and it centers us here at the mothership. And when I say us, it's the royal we. You know that. Anyway, what have we in store for you? Well, Trump describes a dystopian America while on the campaign trail that does not actually exist. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's always fun. knowing that somebody might stumble upon this and it could be new to them and it could open their eyes. It could. On the rest of the menu, hundreds of residents pushed back on the removal of the 30-year-old novel How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents from the Tillamook, Oregon High School Honors Curriculum. Yeah, and this is obviously part of a larger nationwide effort to burn books like the Nazis did, because that's what they are. Or is it what they are? There you go. A lawsuit filed in Los Angeles County alleged that a California rehab center hired and promoted white supremacists. Well, you know, if you're going to transition guys from STIR, you know, you might want to not have them taught by more white supremacists. Because they're getting enough white supremacist education in the clink. And a Federalist Society judge in Kentucky partially blocked a transportation department program for minorities and women over discrimination against, wait for it, white contractors. They're never going to stop. Rust never sleeps. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where German police will increase the number of bodyguards for leading politicians. And China test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean. Well, at least it was in the Pacific, but where? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Right into this first offering, but a reminder, do follow me on social media at Justice Putnam so you'll have access to the show notes and links diary published on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. That way you'll have quick access to this and every article that is referenced here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Speaking of which, this first offering here is by Natalie Pate from Oregon Public Broadcasting. This summer, the Tillamook School Board voted to remove Julia Alvarez's novel, How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents, from the Tillamook High School's 10th grade honors English curriculum. How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents, originally published more than 30 years ago, closely mirrors Alvarez's own life experiences. It tells the story of four sisters growing up in two cultures when their family flees from the Dominican Republic to New York. The book is labeled a notable book by such groups as the American Library Association and the New York Times, and it earned Alvarez the PEN Oakland Jefferson Miles Award for Excellence the year it was published in 1991. Alvarez is a critically acclaimed author, known for having blazed a trail for a generation of Latino authors, as stated in a PBS documentary. The book became a subject of discussion for Tillamook leaders following complaints from students in the 10th grade honors English class last spring, along with their parents, as reported by the Tillamook Headlight Herald. Complaints centered around several sexually explicit passages in the novel. It's always that. Tillamook School District administrators worked with community members and the Tillamook Education Association to review Alvarez's novel. The process is outlined in the district's complaint review policy. I want to mention just something very quickly about this salacious bullshit that always gets brought up about these books, and so we have to take it out because they're teaching kids about sex. They always take these sexually explicit passages out of context. They never have it within the full meat of the book, of the story. There's a reason why these sexually explicit passages are included in a novel, and it's not for the salacious BS that these dirty-minded couch effers come up with every time, and then they recruit their kids to go and push this BS propaganda. Okay, I couldn't help but rant. The majority of the committee felt that this text was not suitable for use as curricular material for 10th grade English language arts. Okay, there's sex in The Yearling. There's sex in Ethan Frome. In fact, the whole thing about Ethan Frome is because the wife was paralyzed and he wanted to get a little sleigh ride on the side. My God. And that was from Superintendent Matt Ellis in a letter to the board this August. The recommendation to remove the book passed on a 4-3 vote by the committee. 4 members voted not to retain the book in the class's curriculum. 2 voted to retain it as part of the curriculum while offering students alternate texts to read. And 1 voted to retain it without restriction. The board would later solidify the decision to remove it. However, Ellis said in a letter the novel will still be available to students through our school libraries, and guess where they're going next and have been. They want to get it out of every library because, I don't know, a hateful heart is only warmed by a burning book. Summer Lynn at the Los Angeles Times brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Managers at a rehab facility in Tarzana gave Nazi salutes, displayed white power gang signs, and abused other staff members with homophobic, racist, and anti-Semitic language, according to a lawsuit filed on Monday in Los Angeles County Superior Court. 7 former and current staff members of Executive Recovery Group, Inc., alleged that the abuse and harassment began after an executive manager was hired, according to a news release from the Los Angeles civil litigation attorneys who filed the lawsuit. The manager replaced 2 Hispanic managers with her white friends, including one who is associated with a white nationalist gang, according to the release. Discrimination and harassment have no place in any workplace, let alone one dedicated to the recovery and well-being of vulnerable individuals. These toxic actions of the management of this facility are not just morally reprehensible, they are illegal under California law, as was stated in the release. The Executive Recovery Group did not immediately respond to a request for comment because they have really sore, stiff arms, really sore. The organization is based in California and owns multiple drug rehab facilities across the state. Meth Nazis? Yeah, they're around, and it's a thing, let me tell you. The company has been the subject of several previous lawsuits, including allegations that it failed to pay overtime wages and failed to prevent a hostile work environment, with Nazi salutes and goose-stepping. The lawsuit asked the court to order the facility to pay unspecified damages. Employees complained about the misconduct over several months, during which Black, Jewish, Latino, and LGBTQ+ employees were discriminated against and harassed. In one instance, the facility's resident assistant, a gay Latino man, was told he shouldn't be bathing patients because of his sexual orientation. One employee had a swastika tattoo on his face. Another employee was heard describing company owners as cheap because they're Jews. Of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal judge in Kentucky has partially blocked a U.S. Transportation Department program that meets out contracts to minority-owned businesses and suggested he may eventually rule against it, marking the latest blow to a government affirmative action program. In a 28-page opinion, U.S. District Judge Gregory F. Van Tattenhove wrote that for now, the scope of the injunction is limited to the two plaintiffs, both transportation contractors, and at least two states, Kentucky and Indiana, where the contractors operate. But in reaching that decision, Van Tattenhove wrote that the government failed to justify the program and that the plaintiffs would likely win on the merits of their constitutional claims, which would have implications nationwide. They're discriminated against because they're men and they're white. Okay. The court is keenly aware of past discrimination that certain groups of people have faced in this country, and the court is sure that the federal government has nothing but good intentions in trying to remedy past wrongs, wrote Van Tattenhove, a George W. Bush appointee, Federalist Society appointee. But remedying those wrongs must still pass constitutional muster. The federal government cannot classify people in such a manner that violates the principles of equal protection. Well, the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, the DBE, is at least the fourth such program in recent months to be enjoined on constitutional grounds. In March, a federal judge in Texas ordered the 55-year-old Minority Business Development Agency to open its doors to all, including white entrepreneurs. Last summer, a Tennessee judge ruled that the Small Business Administration's 8A program for minority contractors could no longer presume certain ethnic groups were inherently disadvantaged, a key requirement to receive set-asides for government contracts. Those challenges represent only a fraction of the lawsuits filed since 2021 that seek to end racial preferences in the private and government contracting sectors. The legal assault against diversity initiatives accelerated after the Supreme Court overturned race-conscious college admissions last June. Well, that's enough to make me stutter. I apologize for that, but it is also time for our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again. from a point at sea to the circles of your mind. A new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, have no fun. Blumhouse's latest is Speak No Evil, a horror thriller about a troubled family on vacation that meets a fun, hot family, goes to their isolated house for a week, and discovers that fun and hot are psychotic killers. Full disclosure, not my thing. So going into it, I wondered, why do we make this type of movie? Is Blumhouse capitalizing off our anxieties over and fear of other people? And, because fun and hot are British to our family of Yankees, living abroad in a foreign world that offers false promises of wealth, but in truth doesn't care about their well-being, are they even straight up profiting off our xenophobia? But then I thought, hold on, maybe I'm letting my issues get the best or worst of me. I mean, it's just not my thing. So maybe. But then, I read an article about how Speak No Evil is a remake of the 2022 Danish film Gæsterne, or The Guests, which has a much grimmer, harsher, and, article's words not mine, near-reactionary ending of, you got what you deserve because you couldn't step up and protect your family from me, my wife, and, I kid you not, our Arab accomplice. Then I'm like, okay. So, Blumhouse changed the film, especially the ending, to get just far enough away from the we're too wimpy liberal accommodating to act on clear stranger danger warning signs, and found a center we could all love, the poor tortured U.S. male. Emasculated by the weakness and neediness of his women, of course he's drawn to strong, fun, dominant father with his playful hot wife and his near-mute son who can neither make demands nor talk back. But wait, says, in my imagination, writer-director of Speak No Evil James Watkins, wait! You're missing my point. You only get that type of masculocentric dream family from a foundation of psychotic, violent oppression. And my new ending allows for the dominated to get their own at the end, see? Okay, fair point. Maybe. Still not my thing, but maybe. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. National and state Republicans will ask the federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals to strike down a Mississippi law which counts mail-in ballots up to 5 days after Election Day. The decision could have national consequences. Oral arguments will be heard in the notoriously conservative Fifth Circuit before 3 Trump-appointed judges on September 24th, but many legal observers see the case as likely to be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court no matter what the outcome. Mississippi law allows for a mail-in ballot to be counted up to 5 days after Election Day, provided it's postmarked on or before Election Day. 16 other states allow extra time, ranging from Texas with 1 day to Washington, which does not have a limit. The GOP argues that for federal elections, federal law is paramount, and Congress directed that federal elections be conducted on a uniform national election day that would not include extra days for mail-in ballots. A ban on extra days could disenfranchise millions of voters, especially if the courts ignore the Supreme Court's own Purcell principle, discouraging voting rights cases too close to an election. Combined with persistent reports of U.S. Postal Service delivery delays in rural areas, democracy advocates suggest voters allow extra delivery time no matter what the court decides. We have the RNC's complaint and analysis of the case linked at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Can a photograph bring about social reform? Louis Hine believed it could, and on this day in labor history, the year was 1874. Renowned photographer Louis Hine was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Hine studied sociology at the University of Chicago, Columbia University, and New York University. He secured a job teaching at the Ethical Culture School in New York City. Hine used photography in his teachings. He took his students to Ellis Island to photograph some of the thousands of immigrants who arrived each day. In 5 years, they had taken more than 200 photographs. Louis Hine continued to use his camera to capture the lives of the poor and working class. Hine traveled the country taking pictures of children who worked in factories. Since factory owners often refused Hine entry into their factories, he sometimes hid his camera and posed as a fire inspector. His photographs helped prod Congress to take up the problem of child labor in the United States. Hine worked for the Red Cross during World War I Belgium, and on his passport, he listed himself as following the occupation of a photographer and investigator. His camera documented the war's devastating impact on French and Belgian citizens. After the war, Hein joined the campaign to establish better safety laws for American workers. In 1930 through 1931, he took photographs documenting the construction of the Empire State Building. He was later employed by the Tennessee Valley Authority to photograph the dam's construction. In addition, he took photos of the Civilian Conservation Corps. These images remain a lasting documentation of the laborers employed by New Deal programs. Louis Hein had difficulty earning enough money from his photography to support himself. His poverty mirrored that of the workers he had photographed. And sadly, in November of 1949, Louis Hein died in poverty.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the upper 70s, low 80s. Partly cloudy this morning, will become overcast during the afternoon, with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Cloudy skies early will give way to... partly cloudy skies early this evening will give way to cloudy skies later at night. Lows around the mid-50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then some clouds in the morning tomorrow will give way to mainly sunny skies for the afternoon. Highs around the mid-80s with winds light and variable. Ragweed pollen is rated high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 30 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the moderate fall range at 5 parts per million. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.75 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is drying out, currently at 71%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 60 degrees and cloudy with a moderate rain advisory. Paris is 60 degrees with rain, with also a warning for rain and heavy flooding. Rome is 78 and fair with a thunderstorm advisory. Kabul is 75 and clear. Hong Kong is 84 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 68 and cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 51 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 59 degrees and cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 65 and sunny, and New York is 66 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A German police office that provides security for leading politicians says it plans to increase the number of bodyguards significantly over the coming years, citing growing dangers at home and abroad as the next national election nears. The head of the Federal Crime Police Office, Holger Münch, said in comments to the RND newspaper group that his office currently has more than 500 bodyguards. He was quoted as saying that it plans to add 100 next year and another 100 after that. His office is responsible for the protection of politicians, including President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, Chancellor Olaf Scholz, federal government ministers, and leading lawmakers in the German parliament. The national election is scheduled for September 28th of next year. German politics are in a disgruntled and volatile state. Just disgruntled, with Scholz leading an unpopular three-party coalition government that has become notorious for infighting, and the far-right Alternative for Germany party pulling strongly. Well, far-right is a nice way of saying that they're neo-Nazis, because they are. Scholz plans to seek a second term. He faces a challenge from mainstream conservative opposition leader Friedrich Merz, whose Union bloc leads in national polls. Christopher Bodine at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. China test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean earlier today, Wednesday, stirring security concerns in the region already tense over Beijing's territorial claims and rivalry with the U.S. The ICBM carried a dummy warhead and fell into a designated area of the sea, the Defense Ministry said in a statement posted to social media. All I want to know is how close to the U.S. coast did it get? How close to Hawaii? The launch by the People's Liberation Army's rocket force was part of a routine annual training, complied with international law, and was not directed against any country or target. According to the statement. It's unclear how often China conducts tests over such a distance. In 1980, China launched an ICBM into the South Pacific. A map published in Chinese newspapers at the time showed the target area as roughly a circle in the center of a ring formed by the Solomon Islands, Nauru, the Gilbert Islands, Tuvalu, Western Samoa, Fiji, and the New Hebrides. The U.S. and non-governmental organizations have said China has been building up its missile silos, but it's unclear how many missiles and nuclear warheads it has added to its arsenal. The People's Liberation Army, which functions as the ruling Communist Party's military wing, runs China's space program, which has established an orbital station and has ambitions to set up a moon base and land a spacecraft on Mars. Rocketry has long been part of China's development into a major global power, spurring nationalism and growth that has made China the world's second largest economy. The tests of China's intercontinental ballistic missiles into international waters are rare. Experts and a historical survey of Chinese program by the Washington-based Nuclear Threat Initiative suggests the last occurred in May of 1980. That test saw China launch its DF-5 missile into the South Pacific. A series of corruption arrests this year ensnared several leading officers in the rocket force, alongside the detentions of 2 previous defense ministers amid allegations of misconduct. A test launch now could both provide assurances to China's population amid an economic downturn and a signal to the world that the party remains firmly in control and is determined to rise to global dominance. Well, I expect Trump to say they're doing great things, won't he? Yes, he will. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.